You move like a verdict that has no need to shout. In every hallway, your stride chooses lawfulness for the rest of the room. Pace, angle, the untheatrical choreography of a man aware of his edges. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is wielded like a weapon. Gravity pours off that gate the way coffee pours from a steady hand. Clean arc, no splash, the promise that the next sip will not be rushed from the first. She feels it before she sees it, a reordering, a subtle hush in the clatter of other people's urgency. The body registers safety and then remembers desire. The mouth answers with warmth. It is the oldest physics: mass, motion, attraction. Your steps have sentences in them. First this, then that. A slide to make space at a doorway. A pivot to let an elder pass. A small advance to take a share of weather at a curb where trucks forget water's aim. Your feet talk to the world in the language of respect, and the world, surprised to be addressed so directly, starts answering with ease. She watches and her own stride changes. The tempo she learned from cities and calendars, the one that wears out ankles and apology, slows to something sane. Her hips remember their natural grammar. The fabric of her skirt discovers it was designed for this exact sentence. The mouth opens just a little because breath has returned to the lower floors and is remodeling. On sidewalks, you don't subdivide space into contests. You make lanes that never existed by the honesty of your pace. People feel it, tuck in behind you, pass when needed, never collide. At crosswalks, you ignore spectacles, dare, and obey timing that keeps bodies intact. Your hand rises in that quiet, universal gesture that says, "I see you," to the driver who isn't looking, and the car remembers humanity in time to stop. The gravity of this is erotic in the way competence always is. She swallows because the throat loves a world in which someone steers with proportion. In a crowded room, your walk draws a path that becomes a corridor for others. You do not slice, you carve gently. Shoulders are angled, not squared. Apologies are offered with the economy of a man who knows he is not the center and behaves beautifully anyway. When you reach her, you don't arrive like a finish line. You arrive like a coastline, clear boundary, open invitation, the promise that land and water can meet without flooding. The space between you is not a container with elbows. It is a bay. Her balance changes near you. Ankles, knees, jaw, they all negotiate with gravity and choose a softer treaty. The lips part because equilibrium has settled, and exhaling is the body's way of saying yes. Stairs prove what the street hinted. You ascend as if you had no quarrel with effort and no romance with display. 2 steps at a time, only when it would not leave anyone else behind. 1 step at a time when togetherness is the point. At the landing, you wait without making waiting into vigil. She arrives, not rushed, not corrected, and you continue as though you had been choreographed for each other by an honest architect. In the mirror that catches your passing, she sees the tilt of her head, the relaxation in the corners of her mouth, and thinks, so this is what poise looks like when it isn't pretending. Buildings learn your walk and behave better. Office doors close without slamming because you guide them. Elevators become kinder because you become a hinge. Hand up, foot anchoring, body turned just enough to shield a stroller. Even the line at the bakery shortens because you know your order before your turn and learn the name of the person who remembers the loaf you like. Gravity in practice looks like this: a world kept from fraying by men who refuse to be friction. She tastes the difference. Ease has a flavor. She recognizes it on her tongue as quickly as she recognizes chaos in her throat. When you dance, it is the same doctrine sung in another key. You step like a man who trusts the floor. You invite weight to shift without demanding it. You lead in the way bridges lead, by existing, by bearing load, by offering options with 2 good exits. She meets your hand and feels a line extend from ankle to palm to shoulder to mouth and the whole body. Hers and yours becomes an instrument that knows its song. There is a moment in the turn when she is blind to everything but balance, and you pour gravity exactly where it is needed. Her head tips back in laughter that comes out of the mouth like a small, ripe confession. You don't cash it, you continue the step. Your stride refuses performance even when heat enters the room. Walking toward her is not hunting, it is arriving. You cover distance with the politeness of a tide that takes its time because it knows the moon is an ally. When you stop, it is close enough for honesty, far enough for freedom. Feet shoulder width, knees forgiven their small imperfections, shoulders arranged for listening, not for intimidation. This geometry tells her nervous system truths the mouth can confirm later. The lips soften, the voice drops. The skin along the jaw decides to become invitation rather than armor. Crisis does not cheapen your gait, it clarifies it. In a parking lot where a cart goes rogue and a child could be its target, you do not sprint like chaos wearing a cape. You lengthen, you angle, you intersect. The correction is clean, the cart is tamed, the child laughs because fear did not get a chance to audition. You return to ordinary pace without needing applause to justify the detour. She watches and feels an ache that has nothing to do with danger and everything to do with the rare sight of strength that didn't require a witness to be real. The ache rises behind the tongue because truth has always made the mouth water. There is a pilgrimage quality to the way you leave a room. Exits are as disciplined as entrances. You do not vanish like a magician selling scarcity. You collect the small obligations ordinary people ignore. Glass to the tray, chair to the table, gratitude to the host. And you aim your last steps at the person who matters most so that departure feels like punctuation, not erasure. When you finally turn, there is one glance, one nod, one private sentence sent entirely in movement. I will return in the same key. She tastes that promise in the place promises are tasted, between expectation and memory, where saliva gathers when something good is on its way. Alone, she carries your walk into her own day like a metronome you forgot on the counter and she refuses to turn off. She moves through her office at a human pace and watches the temperature lower by degrees. She crosses a street and refuses to dash for a car that should be patient. She climbs stairs and remembers that together is a speed. She passes a mirror and sees the smallest change at her mouth. Less tension, more readiness. Later, when she meets you at the corner, her stride matches yours without choreography. Two gravities coordinate. The street cooperates. This is how your gait becomes appetite without ever becoming threat. It keeps time that makes bodies feel possible. It casts a radius in which courtesy is contagious and danger is not in charge. It is handsome in the way rivers are handsome because they move with purpose and carry others. It puts taste into air, not by perfume, but by relief. And so every time she sees you, before a word, before a touch, there is a swallow and a smile and 1,000 tiny muscles choosing openness over defense. The walk poured gravity. The world in her mouth responded like anything that has been offered what it needs, with gratitude made visible. It reaches her before your shadow does. Quiet, persuasive, nothing theatrical. Not cologne announcing a performance, not the sugary shout of a duty-free bottle trying to be remembered, but the low, steady chorus of a life kept in order. There's clean linen that has actually seen a clothesline, cedar that suggests wood you've repaired and not merely bought, soap that minds its own business, a slice of citrus like an early promise kept, the mineral hush of rain-cotton fabric. The blend doesn't hover, it abides. It's the smell of mornings defended from chaos and evenings closed without leaving dishes for tomorrow's mood to wash. When she inhales, her body does math faster than her mind. Reliability plus warmth equals appetite that can afford to relax. The mouth answers the equation the way mouths do, with a tiny flood of readiness at the edges of her lips, the involuntary yes that arrives whenever safety and desire enter the room holding hands. Scent is a kind of memory that doesn't ask permission, and yours is memory's favorite collaborator. In an elevator where everyone is rehearsing their alibis for being alive, your fragrance folds the air into something civil. Fluorescent light becomes less rude. The metallic breath of cables ceases to narrate risk. She catches the trace of you, pale spice, clean skin, wool warmed by weather, and the floor numbers slow to a pace human beings deserve. She swallows without thinking, the reflex the body uses when it realizes it will soon receive instead of defend. The doors open and the lobby is the same, only the atmosphere is altered. She walks through it like someone who has remembered the key to a room she owns. Because you belong to seasons, your scent does too. In summer, there is salt earned honestly, and the faintest sweetness of stone fruit cutting through sun. In autumn, smoke that suggests books and oak and patience. In winter, resin from a tree you actually carried and set straight. The tempered heat of wool that knows the names of wind. a suggestion of pepper close to the pulse. In spring, the clean bite of green things, shirts dried near a window, rain that finished what it started. None of it argues with the room. None of it performs masculinity like a costume. Your scent is a grammar of kept promises, and grammar is erotic when it tells the truth. She leans nearer for a reason she could call curiosity, but the body would call hunger. The tongue learns the smell it trusts. The lips part to take in more of it. That is what desire looks like when it has nothing to fear. The easiest breath of the week. Cloth retains your character long after you leave. And she learns this the first time you drape a jacket over the back of a chair and forget it. The room keeps listening to you through fabric. She passes the chair, and the faint hymn of cedar and soap and motionless rain asks her to pause. She does, and in that small, private chapel of wool and memory, her mouth warms at the edges, and she bites the inside of her cheek to keep from smiling. It isn't loneliness the scent conjures, it's continuity. The jacket smells like a door that will open again, like a train that keeps schedules, like a life that returns what it borrows. She finds herself wanting to lift the collar just a little, not to take anything, only to honor that such steadiness exists and that it chooses her company. When she finally does touch it, 2 fingers and a breath, the faintest gust of you rises, and the reflex lands again. Swallow, smile, carry on. In the smallest places, your presence converts stress back into flavor. A bookstore after rain has its own perfume. Ink, paper, coats drying, dust politely disturbed by hope. You bend to read a first line aloud, and when you straighten, the warmth you leave in the air mixes with the shop's quiet industry. She is close enough to breathe it, and the sentence you read now tastes of you. She tucks the book under her arm like a secret and follows you to the next aisle, a step slower than usual because savoring cannot be rushed without becoming greed. Between shelves, she catches the trace of skin warmed by patience and thinks, this is what it smells like when a man is not borrowing himself from tomorrow. There is discipline behind the softness of your trail. You do not drown a room to announce proximity. You scent a radius where tenderness can find its voice. You keep your shirts clean because a day will ask to be carried, and sweat in your house is a benediction, not a broadcast. You smell like someone who knows how to work and therefore never needs to prove it. She notices the difference in the lobby when you join a knot of conversation. Other men bring fumes that ask for votes. You arrive with an atmosphere that asks for truth. People tell it. She hears the honesty in what follows and associates it, rightly, with the way you attend to detail, including the invisible ones. That is how attraction becomes trust without a speech. If there is a place where your scent is most itself, it might be in the interval between your hello and your first laugh. The one crease, the half-second lift at one corner of your mouth, releases heat into the air the way a lid lets go of steam. It's not a plume, it's a sigh. The exhale carries the taste of citrus and cedar and skin, and it lands on the closest skin with the accuracy of rain that knows the right roof. She feels it at the small triangle above her lips, the place where breath becomes appetite, and her lips part with the kind of modesty that has nothing to hide. There is no performance in the movement, only permission. The room reseasons itself for happiness. In rooms with bad news, your scent does different work. Waiting areas smell like anxiety baked into carpet. You sit down beside her with your hands arranged for usefulness and your patience adjusted for however long reality requires, and the air near you becomes neutral first, then bearable, then faintly kind. Clean soap, warm fabric, a line of spice that refuses to panic. This is the architecture of calm. She leans her head back against the wall and inhales in a measured way, as if savoring broth. The swallow returns, slower this time, and it helps. You do not try to perfume away pain. You bring staying power to a place built for wavering. She will remember that on better days when the breeze carries a rumor of pepper and cedar through a doorway, and she smiles without explanation. Scent makes covenants with motion, and yours keeps pace. In a crosswalk where rain finds the exact angle to be inconvenient, you shift to the street side and hold the umbrella in a way that fixes the wind's mistake. The awning of fabric catches the world's breath. The enclosure holds your warmth. She steps closer because physics insists, and the shelter you make does not smell like possession. It smells like adult competence. The faint heat at your collarbone, the crisp of soap at your wrist, the water darkening wool. Her mouth records the scene in the language it prefers for truth. That behind the lips blossom that says now is worth remembering. Later, when she opens her door at home, the house smells ordinary until a sweater she brushes on a chair returns the weather of you. The swallow comes again, not a thirst but an amen. Sometimes, hours after you're gone, she will be reaching for something on a high shelf, and the drawer below yields a glove you left, one leather, one memory. She presses the inside of the wrist to her face, the way a woman checks whether fruit is ripe, and what answers is not nostalgia. It is logistics. She smells work done well, calls returned, miles earned, apologies made early, a day that will not collapse because you are not there to hold it up. Longing swells, yes, but it does not turn to ache. It turns to plan. Desire climbs the ladder beside it as a partner instead of a thief. This is what your scent does in the end. It persuades the body that a man can be beautiful because he is dependable. She breathes you and discovers she is hungrier for the kind of life your presence implies. Her lips, without permission, grow damp at the edges, a bright, honest proof that appetite is awake and unafraid. Call it drool if you like. The body does not mind accurate words. It is not mindless hunger. It is the mouth honoring a forecast that keeps being correct. The forecast is you. You leave, and the room keeps the weather. Your hands are not ornaments, they are arguments, calm, persuasive demonstrations that the world is more manageable than panic would have us believe. They have the small scars that speak fluent utility. They are clean without being precious, strong without posturing, careful without hesitating. The first time she notices them, it is not because you posed. It is because something in the room almost became difficult, and then didn't. A jar's vacuum seal surrendered to your patient twist. A stuck window yielded to leverage rather than force. A chair was moved the way a friend is moved, lifted from beneath its dignity, not dragged by its face. Her body logs each proof and responds with an ancient courtesy. The throat prepares to say thank you by filling. The lips soften to receive ease the way they receive water. The mouth writes its grateful footnote in warm script along the inner edge. She doesn't perform the reaction. She enjoys it. You do not rush to help to rehearse heroics. You wait one beat to learn what kind of help is wanted. When she says, witness, your hands become still, the sort of still that is work. When she says counsel, your fingers draw a map on a napkin that a woman could follow without trading her agency for your ego. When she says help, the tools appear as if the room had arranged them. A battery is changed. A hinge is oiled. A frame is hung at the right height on the first try. You measure twice, because humility is what keeps competence from becoming theater. She sees the tape slide and retract with that satisfying click, and the corners of her mouth remember how to lift by themselves. Hands that remove friction turn bodies into places where laughter can happen without being scheduled. There is a precision to how you touch objects that translates into how you touch life. When you carry a plate, the thumb shelters the edge, but doesn't smudge it. When you pour to the line and not a fraction past it. When you cut, the blade work is economy itself. No violence, only intention. She watches a lemon surrender to your knife and finds herself swallowing because the sound the rind makes is the sound competence makes when it opens a problem. You wipe the board, you wash the knife, you return the tool to its home because tomorrow is in the room while you cook for today. The mouth honors the scene with the reflex it keeps for good kitchens. It prepares for goodness by making room. In a crowded doorway, your palm appears between her shoulder blades for exactly one breath, pressure tuned to say here, not there, and then it vanishes before the gesture could be mistaken for claim. The exactness is its own vocabulary. You guide without hurting, you stabilize without holding. She reads the language fluently, though no one taught it to her. The lips part again, yes to the coordination, yes to the respect, and the body's weather tilts towards summer. It is not sexual on its surface, which is why it is so trustworthy in its depth. A man who can handle a threshold can be trusted with a threshold. You keep the smallest kinds of ease in stock. A bottle opener appears from nowhere. The right screwdriver arrives before frustration mispronounces the problem. A spare charging cable sits in the drawer where a guest would guess it lives. Tape refuses to disappear because the drawer with tape refuses to hold nonsense. There is always a pen that writes. You do not brag about any of this. Bragging is loud compensation for absent order. Your hands prefer silent abundance. The cumulative effect is a relaxation she can taste. People speak of comfort food as if it were always stew. Sometimes comfort is a drawer that opens to exactly what was needed. The throat learns this solace and answers with tiny warmths and swallows at odd, happy intervals. When heat belongs, your hands are licensed to translate it. You do not presume license. You ask it with ease that makes yes a delight and no an honored citizen. If yes arrives, your touch remains a craft. You move slowly enough to listen, surely enough to lead. Palms, wrists, the fine geography where pulse writes its cursive. Your attention treats each as architecture, not scenery. You do not grip to prove, you hold to learn. She finds her body doing the old mathematics again, adding competence to tenderness and arriving at appetite. The mouth waters a little, not from hunger alone, but from recognition. We are being handled by someone who knows the difference between wanting and taking. In such conditions, desire does not need to defend itself. It gets to bloom. You make repairs that hold. The cabinet door that kept announcing itself during quiet hours learns courtesy from your hinge work. The dripping faucet, that metronome of domestic madness, yields to your patient arrangement of washers and thread. You stand up slow, wipe your hands on a towel that is not your shirt because you respect your shirt, and test the fix. Silence descends. The silence is not empty. It is thick with the relief of something solved without spectacle. She grins, and the grin spills a brightness across her mouth that looks, from a distance, like gloss. It isn't. It's joy with a surface. Your hands know children, which is to say, they know scale and consequence. You high-five softly and stop before skin turns to sting. You build towers meant to be toppled and celebrate the fall, because architecture is a language best taught with laughter. You tie a shoe in front of its owner to show how hands can make beginnings easier. The watching woman registers how your fingers become gentler as the person becomes smaller. The knowledge that you can adjust strength without resenting the adjustment is a secret many women keep on their tongues because they have so rarely tasted it. She does not need to speak it. The body stores it, and the next time you reach for a difficult lid, the warm rush returns in gratitude and in want. In conflict, your hands refuse theater's temptations. They do not punctuate sentences by learning the table the hard way. They open when the mind opens, rest when the mouth should rest, and when wrong is yours, move first to repair, washing, returning, writing, touching the shoulder that deserves the apology. If wrong is not yours, they hold the boundary as if it were a precious vase, firm enough to save it, gentle enough not to shatter what it guards. She watches your fingers resist the urge to point and instead sketch a solution into the air like a blueprint. Bodies relax around blueprints. The palate prefers building to blame. Even your idleness is a service. Sitting on a porch with late light doing its last good work, your hands shell peas or polish an apple or turn a page. They do not fidget in ways that beg attention. They make themselves useful to rest. She leans back, and the mouth does what mouths do when the day finally tastes like itself. It opens slightly, takes in air like fruit, and keeps just a hint of sweetness near the teeth. You notice not to capitalize on the moment, but to admire it, and the admiring is its own flavor. Her belongings become safer around you. A tangled necklace surrenders to your patience, and you don't say anything clever while you work because you are not auditioning for praise. You are solving a knot. When it yields, you lay the chain in her hand like a promise delivered. A heavy suitcase becomes light because you adjust levers instead of muscles first. A stubborn curtain rod learns humility. A plant pot finds its exact window. A picture finds its horizon. She looks at the room afterward and tastes the difference between disorder tolerated and order maintained. The taste is clean water, and her mouth does what mouths do in the presence of clean water. It remembers thirst and answers. There is a choreography to the way you end a day that turns desire into domestic ritual instead of a fragile accident. You close what must be closed. Your hands check locks without paranoia, dim lamps without drama, pull covers to a height that respects sleep's secret treaties. If she is there, You tuck a strand of hair behind an ear with the reverence of someone returning a borrowed book. You do not mistake proximity for permission. You ask with your palm relaxed and your fingers a language she already knows. If she says not tonight, your hands become what they were at breakfast, helpful. If she says come here, they become what they were in the dance, sure. Either way, the mouth keeps its optimism because your touch has taught it that the future will be sensible. Around women who learn self-sufficiency to survive, your hands do a subtle thing. They do not compete with competence, they collaborate with it. You pass a tool like a teammate, not a savior. You hand over the drill and hold the shelf. You let her climb the ladder and you foot it with the kind of seriousness that makes laughter possible at height. She tastes a new balance on her tongue, the flavor of being supported without being reduced. The saliva arrives again, that bright little proof, and she does not hide it. She turns her head to grin, so you can see the shine you caused. One day you will be gone for a stretch. A hinge will squeal, a jar will refuse, a frame will sit crooked. She will feel the old temptation to wait and the newer impulse to act. She will choose the impulse you taught. She will fetch the oil, the towel, the level, the patience. She will do the work and in doing it taste the memory of your hands like a spice that lingers after the cook has left the kitchen. The swallow will come then too, a private toast to the ease you built and left in the room. This is why, when you walk in and reach for a thing that has been heavier all week, the sight of your hands makes heat flicker in her lips and brightness pool along the line where speech begins. Call it drool and let the body be proud of its candor. It is not mindless. It is the most informed desire there is, the mouth's way of honoring what the world feels like when you touch it. Simpler, truer, more delicious to live in. Your quiet is not an empty plate, it is a slow fire. Rooms come in loud, utensils clattering, pots insisting, and you lower the flame to the setting where flavors get honest. The first thing she notices is that her own voice stops racing to catch up with itself. Words that usually tumble and trip begin to arrive with their shoelaces tied. You don't rush to fill the air, you season it. The space between your sentences is the kind of interval where music learns how to be melody instead of noise. In that interval, she feels the smallest muscles at the corners of her mouth release their watch. Warmth collects behind her lips, the way honey gathers at the rim of a spoon. She tastes anticipation without the ache of hurry. It is the body's quiet confession that desire, when it trusts the cook, becomes sweetness. Stillness, in you, is a practiced craft. You don't withdraw, you calibrate. In conversations that tilt toward performance, you let the applause die of thirst. In meetings where agendas try to become battlegrounds, you keep your posture steady and your answers shorter than your understanding, which is why people stop auditioning for your approval and start reaching for clarity. She watches, and the anxious choreography she learned from years of rooms that mistake volume for value unlearns itself. Her shoulders fall back into their real address. Her breath drops to the lower floors where it can do some good. Something like hunger tripwires the mouth, not the frantic kind that raids a pantry, but the deep appetite reserved for meals that will be remembered. You sit like you believe furniture is an ally. That simple trust changes the weather. On a couch, you become the anchor point for cushions that want to be useful. At a bar, your forearms claim exactly as much territory as respect requires and no more. In the park, a bench treats you like reliable geometry, and she treats the bench like a stage where she doesn't need to perform. Her knee angles toward you without asking permission from the brain. Her fingers drift to the edge of her glass just to feel the temperature of the moment before it is named. The mouth opens a fraction, that reflex of receiving that never learned how to lie, and she remembers what it means to be fed by presence instead of posture. Your eyes are patient heat. They don't interrogate, they marinate. When she speaks, you let the gaze rest long enough to catch the subtle flavors. How conviction rises when she talks about work that matters. How mischief lights the room when she remembers a childhood rebellion. How grief softens the pitch and invites a slower reply. Your replies respect those temperatures. You don't cool what needs to simmer. You don't crank a boil under what asks for low and slow. She tastes your listening as surely as she tastes the wine. That's why her lips keep gathering gloss without a tube in sight. The body produces its own shine when attention turns into care. In a crowded lobby, two people compete for center stage. You do not contest it. You return the stage to the middle of the room where it belongs and allow silence, yours, to be the most persuasive thing happening. She feels the room migrate toward your pace because human beings prefer to breathe. The tug at the base of her tongue is faint but unmistakable, the swallow that happens when equilibrium returns to a space built for imbalance. Stillness, here, is not an absence of power. It is the arrangement of it. Nothing is being taken. Everything is being set down where it can be reached. There's a moment you love and never rush. The breath between her last sentence and your first touch. You keep it intact, like a dome over a candle. It is in that breath that consent acquires a body and desire gets its bearings.